We're really honoured to have Corbin Majandi here representing the Mirarr Traditional Owners. And I just wanted to reflect the Environment Centre of the Northern Territory, the organisation I'm so privileged to lead at this time, was created to oppose uranium mining in Kakadu National Park. This is in our DNA, and we have been proud to support the work of Mirarr Traditional Owners for many decades, and it's entirely appropriate that you are given prominence here today at this incredibly special gathering. So I'd love to invite Corbin up to the stage to sit with Peter Garrett and also Dave Sweeney and another legend, Kirsten Blair, who had my job, how long ago? Over 20 years ago? Yep. Who's been working with Gundjakmi Aboriginal Corporation for a number of years to facilitate this incredibly important discussion about what the Mirarr vision is for the future. And there will be an opportunity for questions as well as part of this. Thank you.
As Kirsty said, I'm Kirsten Blair. I have a long history with the Territory. I've maintained that connection with Mirarr since the Jabiluka time. And I know a lot of you from that time. I know a lot of you know this story really well. I spent time working at the Environment Centre in the late 90s and early 2000s, and have been really grateful to continue to work based here in the Territory from South. I've been South for a long time now. But I just wanted to do an overview because there's possibly some people in the room who don't know. I'll just give the really basics of Mirarr's story with relation to uranium mining, and I guess it's really important to note that Mirarr's experience with mining is a very recent part of the connection with country that Mirarr have. So on Mirarr country is the Mudjabebe site, which is where there is evidence of the longest human occupation in Australia. So there's an archaeological site that shows 65,000 years of continuous occupation. So uranium mining and the pressure of that really has only been around for a couple of generations. And what we're seeing now is Mirarr outliving that comparatively fleeting attempt to create a lot of trouble, and it certainly has had a big impact on community and country. But we're in this window now, but it is a short window in comparison to the long-held relationship that Mirarr have with their country and their culture. So in the late 1970s, a lot of pressure was put on Corbin's great-grandfather, Uncle Toby, and other traditional owners in Kakadu to agree to mining at Ranger uranium mine. So as Kirsty mentioned, as Dave mentioned, it was yet another example of North Australia being seen as this potential bonanza. This was going to be the Saudi Arabia of the South. Look at all this uranium. We're so lucky we can export energy to the world. Let's get started at Ranger and we'll just keep going from there. We're going to build this town of Jabiru and it's going to be a mining town until at least 2065. And the excitement about those uranium deposits, you can still see that in some of those old guys' eyes who just really thought this is what was going to happen. And so that was, one of those examples, and we know it keeps happening. The 10-year anniversary, as Kirsty mentioned, of that Tony Abbott white paper for North Australia. It keeps on happening, but it was happening back then to a group of people who had been living on country and really had had pretty limited interaction with white people. Certainly hadn't had any direct experience of anything as developed as mining. And when I say developed, I guess I mean destructive, actually. And Toby was really clear he didn't want that. He was really clear, and there's a lot of evidence of it. And what ended up happening at Ranger, was it was about the same time as the Northern Territory Land Rights Act was being drafted, and it was about the same time as the idea of Kakadu National Park was being floated. And what Toby was told was, look, if you like the idea of land rights and you want your people and your families around Kakadu and all the Aboriginal people in the Territory to have land rights, then actually you have to say yes to mining at Ranger because that's the trade-off. So in the Land Rights Act, it actually says any community can say no, they've got a right of veto over mining on their country anywhere unless you happen to be the Mirarr at Ranger. So that's the deal. That was the deal. So that's the basis on which uranium mining started on Mirarr country. So it's pretty skewed. And it was horrible. Mirarr didn't want it, but they didn't say, oh, okay then, well, that's happening. We'll just expect the rest of it to go ahead. They were like, nah, we don't want any more of that shit. Excuse me. And so the Jabiluka proposal came along, And this was in the 80s, and Toby, again, was really insistent. This is not going to happen, we don't want this to happen. And that was a tough fight. He'd already been told, you can't withstand this, and he'd seen it happen. He'd seen Rangers start, and he continued to maintain his opposition, and it really bore him out. And he passed that responsibility on to his daughter, Yvonne Margarula, who's Corbyn's auntie. And she, as many of you know, has spent her entire life resisting mining on her country. That's been her life's work. And we've got some great pictures to share in a minute. So Yvonne, in the mid-1990s, when the Howard government came into power, and there'd been a big hiatus in uranium development because of the Labor Party and their 3 mines policy, but John Howard was very excited about Jabiluka. A call made by the traditional owners, come and support us on country, come and help us withstand this push to mine at Jabiluka. And many of the people in this room were a part of that response, and the Northern Territory Environment Centre was essential in that fight. And a lot of you played a really important role. I just was chatting to someone who I know was involved in initially digging toilets at the blockade. So everything anyone did was amazing. And this picture sort of, in some ways, summarises one aspect of that. So that's walking along the Oampelly Road. A lot of you will know that spot, along the Jabiluka lease, standing. Yvonne's leading that walk. A lot of family of Corbyn are in that picture, and lots of people in this room are probably in that picture too. So we really saw a peak of support for Mirarr and opposition to uranium mining, and it's really come to symbolise the capacity for resistance in the face of relentless certainty that the development would happen. This is a beautiful example of the resistance. So this was in 1997. Some of Corbyn's family, and I don't know if you can see them because they're tiny in this picture, there are people up there. This was an old school canvas banner. People carried this up the escarpment and dropped it off on the Oampelly Road, so the 250,000 tourists who drove down that road that year saw this, learnt the word Jabiluka and thought, hey, this doesn't look like the kind of thing you normally see in a national park, what's a go? And this was before the internet, so this is the social media. Heaps of people came up, stood with everyone, there's Yvonne, lots of people. And over the course of this campaign, which took many forms, there was international involvement, there was the Goldman Prize. Yvonne Margarula and Jackie Katona were awarded the Goldman Prize, which is like the environmental Nobel. This is a big deal. Lots of things happened, lots of engagement. During the course of this time, the company started digging the hole. Now, you would think that'd make you think, oh, well, this is done. They've started to dig that hole, but no. The Mirarr were certain this would not happen, and they got Rio Tinto to the table. And this is a picture of a mining truck. Which direction is it driving? It's taken the ore back under the ground. And we were just up on this site this week. Does not look like that, let me tell you. Do you want to talk to us about this picture?
Hello, UMob. So yeah, that photo there was with us, Jabiluka with anti-mob. And when we went back there, it was a bit emotional. Because all the old people, our anti-mob was thinking about Albert father and, the mob before them. What would they say now, seeing the achievement that we've done. And again, I'd just like to thank, David Mob, before us, KB Mob that was there to help us in the first place. Because, UMob did all the heavy work, heavy lifting, and made it easy for us, a new generation, to come in and, look after. So yeah, it was hard, before back then, when government came to Grandpa Mob and they said, nah, either you let us mine or we still gonna mine anyway. Like, what was that thing? You get royalty and we mine, or you don't get royalty and we're still gonna mine. And all the other family mob, it was hard for anti-mob too, because the mining mob sort of persuaded other clan mob and other family mob, and they pressured anti-Yvonne mob too. And it was, because you always talk about it, it was really hard to fight even us mob own people about mining and stuff like that, because you hear other mob, they say, oh, it's good for job, it's good for this. And then anti-mob say, no, it's not good, because one, you're destroying country, and all you care about, is money. So it's been really hard. Some family member, passed away before they even would have seen the success that we got now. So yeah, it was good.
So Yvonne's in the middle there. So some people are really familiar with a lot of the photos of Yvonne that were taken probably 20 years ago. So time passes, it's happened to all of us. And Yvonne's sister Valerie, and someone who a lot of you will have seen a photo of. So the young woman on this end is Nonica, and she's the little girl who's on Yvonne's hip in a lot of these pictures from the old times. So she drove Yvonne up onto the lease this week. And yeah, so Corbin and his brother Davis, who'll be here later, and sister were all part of the campaign, or were not born and have been part of the campaign in recent times, I should say.
Again, for those who don't know me really, us, my family, we come from the eldest brother, Toby's older brother. And, you know, because back in the days when only old people used to go for jobs, other way else, he went down to Catherine and used to work at a cattle station back then. So most of my family been staying back with Catherine. And then, yeah, well, Auntie Yvonne's father, the old man Toby, stayed back and said, no, we got to look after the country properly, because he saw what they're doing and, you know, the things that they've done to country before. And after that, you know, after Fukushima meltdown, you know, we thought, well, especially all old people, they thought, because with that mining site, the other ranger, not Jabiluka, where they were digging up where that two-headed snake egg was. So Jitpi, Mount Brockman, that's where, you know, Asmob dreaming that one way that represent Mirarr. So when they dug up and they took it to Fukushima, and then the meltdown happened, we felt really sorry for them, because it been come from Asmob, and we felt responsible in a way. So we sent up a letter to all the Japanese mob, and we said, oh, sorry this happened to you, mob, because, you know, the things that we've seen time and time again, the tension that's happening internationally, you know, with that war in the Middle East and Europe, and, you know, there's other drama happening with China and stuff like that, and people are arming up. It's getting scarier and scarier, because, you know, it might happen to my generation, or maybe generation before that, it might end up like, anyone played Fallout game before? Like that. It might happen like that, a nuclear war and then just wasteland, so.
We're going to stand up and stop that. Peter, I wanted to invite you to reflect a bit on the role of the various organisations you've represented, particularly with relation to the Jabiluka story.
Yeah, thanks, Kirsten. Look, pretty brief, because I think that for me, apart from the fact that this was a very important and long-standing campaign which traversed pretty much my whole working life, activist, muso, you know, poly, etc. From the very start, it was the enduring and strong commitment to relationship that was evinced by Mirarr and their call for support, which led to the ACF ultimately not only being involved in the campaign, hopefully supported and sent a bit, but more significantly, eventually signing what was called the Kakadu Charter. So I was ACF president, a former executive director, Don Henry's here, and we signed that charter as a way of maintaining the ongoing intentional work to support Mirarr on what was going to be a very difficult and hard-fought campaign. And that charter, I think, was one of the most important things that we ever did, because it was a demonstration of trust on our part. And to be really blunt, if you get people moving on in organisations, leaderships can change, people can forget stories while you're doing it, other things come up, etc. It's a long way away from Melbourne, which is where the ACF is headquartered. There was every chance that the sort of support that would be necessary almost in perpetuity wouldn't be there. So I'm really pleased that we were able to do that. I mean, just very quickly, the environment organisations, including the major organisations, ACF in particular, did have an honourable history at that point in time of contesting the shape of Kakadu National Park and the fact that both Ranger Koongarra and Jabiluka had been excised. That was a wrong that needed to be righted. And so eventually, for that to happen is quite incredible. And the final thing to say is that, and this is, for me, even more important than anything else, we went on to the lease yesterday as Yvonne, Corbin and family had the opportunity to go there. But we still were in a situation of getting the gate unlocked by ERA. That won't happen again, by the way. And that's how long it's taken. it is a template for us to understand in working with First Nations peoples to help them protect their country. Yvonne's braveness and leadership was phenomenal. Haven't witnessed anything like that. It's certainly not common. And the enduring commitment that people made, including a number of you in this room, also was absolutely phenomenal. And that's what got it there. And a very proud moment, I think, for everybody at this stage.
And we're very, as Peter just said, we're very nearly there with Jabiluka. It's a slightly strange legal situation with the lease expiring, but now it's being tied up in some very irritating legal business by some greedy minor shareholders at ERA. But we're very close, and we're really looking forward to the day that the federal government does what they said they would do, which is put Jabiluka into the Kakadu National Park. And there are certainly some steps they could be taking. We might talk more about that in a minute. But the other, of course, really significant thing is that there has been a mine on Mirarr country for 40 years, which is Ranger. And Dave, I just wanted you to maybe, if you're happy to, just to describe for people what the best possible outcome we can hope for at Ranger would be.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ranger was the longest Australian uranium mine imposed against the explicit intentions of the Mirarr. The Mirarr fought Ranger. The federal government responded by changing federal labour. The federal government changed federal legislation to secure Ranger. And there was a determination, yes, the Mirarr are opposed, but the phrase was, their opposition shall not prevail. A legalistic determination that put aside 67,000 plus in our years documented continuing presence on a site. So that mine was imposed. It operated for 40 years, Australia's longest one, and it is now closed, and it has now moved from a failing mine to Australia's most costly, complex rehabilitation project, the biggest mining rehabilitation project by far in Australia. And it cannot fail. The mine failed, the rehabilitation cannot. So probably the biggest thing now, and a big thing for environment groups and ECNT, ACF and others, Mineral Policy Institute, a whole bunch of groups have been watchdogging this along the way, is to make Rio Tinto aware and accountable. Aware that the world is watching, and aware that they will be closely watched and long judged by their performance of how they clean and exit Ranger. And this is the company that destroyed Juukan Gorge. They have had more than their allocated share of disgraceful damage, and they will be long judged, and their social licence depends on what they do at the Ranger project area. So that's a massive piece of work.
Been a lot of work. The mining company has really, they've heard the fact that Mirarr need the site to be returned to a state that they can access. There's a legal requirement for it to be rehabilitated to a state that it could be incorporated into the World Heritage Area. So that is, as Dave said, the biggest mining rehabilitation requirement in Australia. And this is an unprecedented task. And I know people love using that word, particularly since COVID, but seriously, it's a big hole in the ground. This is wet, dry tropics. They have had extensive water management issues throughout the life of that mine. So whether or not it's possible is actually being tested. But the commitment is there, and Mirarr have repeatedly held the Rio Tinto, which fortunately is a big company, lots of people have heard of it. They don't like the idea of looking like they're bad players in this context. They've certainly done plenty of atrocious things around the world in lots of places, and certainly in Australia, as people would be aware with Juukan. So the efforts that they are stating that they want to go to are significant, and we need to hold them to that. And in this session, so this footage, and I might see if we can put it up on some materials at some point or something, but there was a session where rehabilitation, the reforming of the first pit at Ranger was completed, and Mirarr were invited to come and participate in planting the first trees. And Yvonne spoke very powerfully about how significant that was, because she remembered how much her dad didn't want to see this happen. And this was a coming back onto country and a moment of reclaiming. And in some ways that's really similar to what we did on Tuesday when we went up onto the lease. It was a reclaiming, it was an accessing the site. And certainly, we were standing there waiting, and Corbin said, how come we're not going up there? And I was like, because we've got to wait for someone to turn up with the key. Corbin, I wanted to check with you, I know there's lots of things that you you've got lots of reflections. But I was interested in your thoughts on, I mean, Toby just was speaking so powerfully then about thinking about the future, and you're the next generation after the one he was talking about coming forward. And I'm thinking about the fact that it's your generation where these changes are going to happen, and you're going to be the people who see it end. And I'm just thinking about how that feels for you.
Yeah, I feel like I hope that it'll be easy when I get a little bit older. Not go through the things that my family might have been through. I've only tasted a little bit on what ERA was really like when I went to, I think it was in Sydney, for federal court, Rio Tinto, and ERA was arguing about, Rio Tinto's bullying all the small shareholders, and they're like, oh, why are you bullying us and this and that. Anyway, we went there, and then they put out a statement, or they were talking, I think it was in a podcast or news, saying that, oh, we've only heard it from white fellas. They don't want mine. We've never heard from black fellas. I think they want mine. And then we were thinking like, geez, how much, how many years that, they had to put through the old people, all the stress and worry about this. And then all of a sudden they said, no, I think the younger generation want mine. I think they do want mine. We've just been hearing it from white people. And, well, I was going to bloody swear, but no, it kind of, annoyed me. That was only the tiny bit on what they were capable of. And I can't imagine what it was back then in the 70s, even earlier than that, where we didn't have too much to say, even though we wanted to say something, but obviously just ignored us. I hope that it'd be easy. Like I said before, UMOB did all the heavy lifting, all the proper fights. So, I'm very grateful. And, my generation, probably after my generation too, it'll be good.
Yeah, the fact that the company was still, there's these minority shareholders of ERA who still are holding out hope that they might get to mine at Jabiluka. And that's one of the things they've been running this line. We haven't heard it from the Mirarr. And so even though Yvonne feels like she's had to say the same thing over and over, Corbyn's now having to say it as well, which is extraordinary. But one of the things you said to me the other day when we were talking about this was you said you're looking forward to being the last ones to shut the door.
Yeah, no, it was, it's just that feeling of, I don't know, it's like a rule or something. The last person shut the door, and I was just joking about it, like welding it, put a chain across it, and, keep out.
Thank you, Corbyn. So I think we've got a bit of time, so we could take a couple of questions if people have them.
What the young fellow was saying, that's really good. My name is Jack Green, and I just got a question for Peter Garrett when he was down in Baralula. How do you feel when you were there? Could you respond on that? Because we welcome you into our country. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack, and I was pleased to be able to come down and spend time with you. I feel that it's a tough situation, particularly when we have original decisions that are made, and sometimes legally made and sanctioned, without the consent of people on country, traditional owners and community, and then unpacking and trying to reverse engineer those decisions over a period of decades is very difficult, no more so than for Mirarr and no more so down in Borroloola. However, I really felt that your community was in a position to now make some significant interactions with the mining company there. I know that you'll get the support from people here. You have my support. And it does show, I think, this campaign that we're hearing about now before we hear from UMOB, what is possible over the long term. So a feeling of positivism, Jack. Thank you.
Hey, my name's Harriet. Thank you so much for that presentation. It's really great to get an update on what's going on with those two projects. I was just wondering if you can give us an overview of who's paying for the rehabilitation, the split between ERA, Rio Tinto, and the federal or territory governments. Just want to know how much the taxpayers are putting out for this.
Yeah, it's a great question because everyone's really quick to have a party to cut the ribbon to open something, and everyone's really slow to pay the cleaner. And that's what's happening out there. There's about I think about 500 million in a Commonwealth bond that's been paid by ERA over years. That was meant to be the money that cleans up. The cleanup is now $2.4 billion. That's a very and growing, yeah, and that's a very significant shortfall. They're $2 billion shy of what they need to do. Rio Tinto is largely picking that up, and our aim is to hold them to that. It's their responsibility, and they need to clean it up, and they have deep enough pockets, and they must do it. They have reputational exposure. They have their fingers in this project. They need to clean it up. And so far, that's tracking that way. But ultimately, the ultimate underpinner is Commonwealth liability, and so that's taxpayer. We are very keen in this case, Hillary, to avoid the standard Australian mining thing of private profit and public cost. Acutely aware of that, and hence, a strong corporate focus on this cleanup.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing to that, because, yeah, absolutely. And it's part of what Mirarr have been really working on throughout, just every chance reminding Rio and really pinning Rio's name to the cleanup. And the other thing that's probably worth noting, and it's certainly that cleanup number is rising, but the amount of profit that ever came out of Ranger is smaller than the cleanup bill. So on balance, in fact, yeah, so some people have done well out of it, but overall that company has lost money and will continue to, which is not a reason not to do it. Obviously they should pay the cleanup. Certainly shouldn't end up being the taxpayer, and that's part of what the work we're doing, yep.
Yeah, Sam Phelan, just interested in ongoing exploration in the area. I've heard that over at Gumballanya they're looking at exploring, and I'm not sure what for or what company is doing that.
Yeah, Sam, thanks. And there is a lot of exploration over in East Arnhem in particular, like near Narbarlek, over near Gumballanya, and also out towards Coburg. There's a range of companies. Alligator Energy is one. Cameco, who's got a long-term presence in the area, is another. We need to keep, what they say, eternal vigilance for democracy. It's also the same for nuclear free. We need to sort of inform and keep literate, keep our eye on the cleanup, but make sure that there's no new ones opening up. There is going to be a continuing push for nuclear and hence for uranium mining. We're seeing lots of spruik and speculation. We had a great community national rejection of nuclear in this country at the recent federal election, and that was a repudiation. Major policy difference between the two major parties was renewable or radioactive. Australia voted renewable. Unfortunately, the Nationals dogged to a bone on nuclear. Lots of players, the Mineral Council and others, will be there. And the price internationally for a range of reasons, geopolitical reasons about the Russian war, etc., is rising. So there will be increased speculation. And what we need to do is watch closely, not jump at shadows, and check out what's the difference between kicking at rocks and trying to mine the share market and turning over rocks and actually wanting to mine this country and trying to navigate with our resources that sort of balance. So very open. And one thing, quick plug, you mob are the Moms Connected, on the ground, eyes and ears. I live in Naarm in Melbourne. Love to hear this sort of stuff about what's happening. That's how collectively we can inform and keep a track on things.
My question's a bit broader, but I'm reflecting on this session. I remember busloads of people coming up from Naarm to support Corbyn and his family. And I'm reflecting also on some of the keynotes earlier around this idea of people in place, but also allies from down south and what have you. There's constantly a message from people in power up here around all of these people that are protesting about this. They're not from here. They're from down south. Go back to where you came from. They'd lose a lot of teachers, social workers and other staff if we did, because we do live here. But I'm very, very curious about whether you can discuss this, about how we can sort of try and mitigate this sort of narrative, which does put the people that we want to bring into the conversation, it puts them off, I think. How do we challenge this?
Look, I think that's just a part of the toing and froing of, the tropes that run around up here media and, the antagonists on the other side of the fence, really. And to be honest, sticks and stones, you know what I mean? Sorry? Well, I know they believe it, but unfortunately there are people that believe a lot of stuff around the place that you can't argue or discuss with them rationally. I suppose that's a really good response. The truth of it is that, well, there's a lot of truths running at it here, so just do them very quickly. The campaign to come up and support Mirarr, Corbyn's family and others, and to support the work that was already underway from NSENT and the ACF had sort of started on, would never have got the level of intensity and energy and public visibility, notwithstanding the great leadership from Yvonne, if people hadn't travelled from Naarm and gone on the blockade. And that's the truth of it. And I think, from my memory and recollection, is that the majority of Australians that visited to become part of that came were actually from Melbourne. The second thing is that, get the stick out of your own eye, dude, because what happens in this state is that most people, a lot of people, apart from First Peoples, come and go. You haven't maintained an increasing population in the top end ever, despite all the boosterisms. And so it's really a silly thing to say. And the final one is this. Anyone should be proud to come and help people defend country, no matter what, no matter where they come from. And that should be the end of it. It's not a postcode issue.
True. Can I just jump in too, because it's a really good point. I get that all the time. Radioactive waste dumps in different places all the time. You're not from here, go away. And it's a Scooby-Doo critique. I would have got away for it if it wasn't for those meddling kids. And the meddling kids have come from outside and exposed the thing that's going on. So I'd say that we come from a perspective that says we care about a planet, not a postcode. And the other thing that's really always intrigued me, and I've thrown it back in pubs and lived dangerously with occasional conversations, is that you're going on that I can't be here, you're going on that I can't be here, so yet you vote One Nation. We're one nation. We're Australians before we're fill in the gap postcard. And that I think is really important. I don't want to go down a nationalist sort of line, but we live in a country which is magnificent and which is under threat, and every Australian, along with the kangaroo and emu on that passport, has a responsibility to support the land that makes that kangaroo and emu live.
I guess I've got one little thing to say as well, Nicole, which is one of the things that was really evident in the lead up, and if you were here, you would remember that the Northern Territory News was really insistent on that division and very keen to sort of whip people up into that parochial frenzy. And we see it routinely with othering and just driving from fear. And the conversations we've already had this morning are all about connection and remembering that we're actually all on the same page, and we're all in this together is such an overused phrase, but it's so true, and we're all on this planet together. And one of the attempts, which some people will remember very well, and I really wish I'd brought my shirt, the first day of the Jabiluka blockade, the NT News headline was Greenies behave, but Greenies warned behave or else. So it was very us and them, and it went on from there. But the thing is that people kept coming. We had those bus loads and people worked together, and we've seen this outcome. So I guess I totally know what you mean about people responding in fear, but history's also speaking, and that unity is really what's giving us the results.
Before we finish up, I'd just like to say real quickly, again, thank you, Mob, for, being here and helping us, and just to the support, just to, I guess, make the future better. So again, very grateful and a pleasure to be here to talk to you, Mob. But yeah, thank you, Mob. Thank you.